want to tell you about 4 minutes I wasn't in the room for. Not 4 minutes that happened to me, 4 minutes that happened to somebody standing about 15 feet away while I was behind a curtain, breaking down boxes, thinking about nothing at all. Nobody was hurt, nobody was touched, nothing was taken. It's not really my story at all. I've still never been able to put it down. I worked evenings in a little shop on a dead stretch of road. Candles, cards, cheap jewelry, incense, the kind of place with a bell over the door and 9 customers a night. 2 of us on a shift, and the way it always broke down was this: 1 out front on the till, and 1 in the back room with the stock, behind a curtain in a doorway. From the street, you could see the whole shop through that window. Bright as a fish tank. Every shelf, the counter, whoever was standing at it. But you could not see the back room at all. From out there, the curtain was just a wall. That night, I was in the back and she was out front, and it was the slowest kind of slow. Rain that couldn't commit. 1 car every few minutes, the radio down low. I had a stack of boxes and a knife and a whole hour of nothing ahead of me. And then the bell went. A man's voice out front, older, perfectly pleasant, and her voice doing the shop voice back. I didn't even look up. But I'd been in that room enough nights to know what a customer sounds like through a curtain. There's a rhythm to it, footsteps that go somewhere, things being picked up and put down, questions about a price, a size, whether we've got another one in blue. And there was none of that. There was a man's voice, and there was her voice, and underneath it, there was nothing. No footsteps, no shelves. He was standing in one spot in the middle of my shop, talking to her, and he wasn't moving at all. I'd like to tell you I understood something. I didn't. I just got to the end of a box, and the next box was out front under the counter, and so I picked up the empty one and pushed through the curtain the way I did 40 times a shift. No instinct, no feeling. The most boring possible reason to walk into a room. I had the flattened box in one hand, and I wasn't even looking up. He stopped in the middle of a word. Not startled, not jumpy. He just stopped, the way a machine stops when the power goes. And I got my first real look at him. Older, tidy, gray coat, hands still in his pockets. A completely forgettable man you'd hold a door for. And he was not looking at me. He was looking past my shoulder, at the curtain I'd just come through, like he was checking a sum he'd already finished. I stood there, holding a flattened box like an idiot. My colleague was still doing her face, the polite one, waiting for whatever he'd been about to say. And nobody said anything for a second too long. He looked at the curtain, he looked at her, he looked back at me, and nobody moved at all. Because he didn't apologize. He didn't get embarrassed or make a joke or invent a thing he'd been meaning to buy. He didn't reach for a shelf or pat a pocket or glance at the door. He turned his body slightly toward me, and he took the tone people use at a returns desk. Reasonable, mild, a little bit tired. The voice of a man clearing up a small administrative mix-up that wasn't really anybody's fault. And he said, I should tell you why I came in. I saw her from the street, and I had it in my head there was nobody in here but her. That's the whole of it. And he gave me a small nod, like we'd sorted it out between us. And he said good night to her, perfectly pleasantly, and he walked out. The bell went over the door. We stood there. I remember the radio still going, and the rain still not committing, and the cardboard in my hands. She laughed. That laugh people do when the noise has to come out somewhere. She said, well, that was weird, and started tidying the counter that didn't need tidying. And I couldn't stop hearing the tense he'd used. Not, I thought she was alone. I had it in my head. Past, settled, decided, before he ever put his hand on the door. And the 4 minutes I hadn't been in the room for turned into something else while I stood there. They weren't 4 minutes of an odd old man making chat. They were 4 minutes of a man standing inside a small bright box with one woman in it, hands in his pockets, touching nothing, buying nothing, taking his time about it. And the only thing on this earth that ended them was that the second person in the building happened to be behind a curtain, doing boxes. We told the owner the next day. He asked 3 questions. Did he take anything? Did he touch either of you? Did he threaten you? No, no, and no. So that was the end of it, and honestly, what else was there? A man came into a shop that was open, said 1 sentence, and left. And he never came back to us. For a while, that felt like the end of it. It stopped feeling like the end of it the first evening I locked up and stood at our window for a minute and counted how many other little lit-up rooms there were down that road, with one person standing in them. I still work nights, and I still like working nights. I didn't quit. I didn't move. I didn't buy anything to keep under a counter. I changed one thing, and it's so small it's almost embarrassing. I don't work behind a shut curtain anymore. I leave it hooked back so I can hear the front properly. Footsteps, shelves, somebody asking about a price. All the ordinary noise a person makes when they actually came in to buy something. She never knew what she was for those 4 minutes, and I've never told her, because what would I even be telling her? But I hear my shop now, every shift, and I'd much rather feel silly about a curtain than find out the other way what the quiet meant. Supermarket, 7:30 on a Tuesday. I'm 30-something, I'm tired. I'm buying the same 11 things I buy every week, and I am the least alert human being in that building. I was just the man in the next aisle, and I've been carrying it around for years now because there is genuinely nowhere to put it down. I noticed him the way you notice a thing that's slightly the wrong shape. He was at the end of the aisle I was in, standing at the corner where the aisle meets the main run. Gray jacket, middle-aged, completely ordinary. And he was just standing there, not moving along, not reaching for anything, which is nothing on its own. People stand about in shops, waiting on somebody, killing 10 minutes. But I'd been in that shop 20 minutes, and I'd already walked past him twice. So the second time, I actually looked at what he was doing. He wasn't looking at shelves. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was standing at the mouth of the aisle, turned about a quarter into it, the way you stand when you're waiting for somebody who's still in there. And in the aisle, there was a woman on her own with a half-full trolley, doing exactly what I was doing, reading a label, deciding about pasta, having the most ordinary evening of her life. And I told myself the thing you tell yourself. He's waiting for his wife. He's bored. He's early for a lift. There's always a reason, and it's always something boring. But I'd noticed it now, and I couldn't unnotice it, so I started checking. I decided I'd look for him one more time, and if he wasn't there, I'd forget it. He was there, not near me, at the end of whatever aisle she was in. Same stance every time, never in the aisle, always at the mouth of it. I went the long way round and watched from the far end, and it kept happening. Fruit and veg, then the back wall, then the freezers, then the tills. 4 departments. And in all that time, with all those shelves he was standing next to, I never once saw him touch anything. Not pick a thing up, not turn a box over. Not a single reason to be in a shop. She went to pay and I got in the self-scan 2 lanes down from her, because by then I wasn't leaving until she did. He didn't queue at all. Didn't join a line, didn't go to the machines, didn't get in behind her. He waited down by the end of the tills doing nothing, and the second her lane started actually moving, He turned and went out through the doors ahead of her. Ahead of her, not behind. And that was the first moment my stomach did anything, because that isn't following, that's getting there first. I came out maybe a minute after her, and she was parked right out at the edge. That far row every big car park has, where two of the lamps are out and the tarmac just goes black. She was loading bags into the boot, taking her time, phone tucked under her chin. And he was maybe 30 feet from her, doing a performance, patting his pockets, turning around slowly, looking up and down the row, like a man who cannot remember where he left his car. And I stood by my own boot and I watched him do that for a lot longer than anyone has ever looked for a car. And then I saw the thing that got my legs moving. He wasn't drifting toward any car. There were cars all along that row, and he never went near one of them, never lifted a hand with keys in it, never looked through a window. The only thing in that whole black corner he was slowly, patiently getting closer to was the open boot of hers, and the side of it she was standing on. Looking for his car was just something to do with his hands, while the distance came down. So I walked over. I didn't shout, I didn't square up, I'm not that guy. I got about 6 feet away and I asked him one flat question. Are you following that woman? And for about half a second, his face wasn't ready. Genuine surprise, not guilt, not fear. The surprise of somebody being spoken to in a language he wasn't expecting to hear in that car park. And then it closed. And what was underneath it wasn't angry, and it wasn't embarrassed. It was just nothing, held on me a beat too long. He didn't answer me. He didn't deny it, didn't explain, didn't tell me to mind my business, didn't do one single thing I could have told a police officer about afterwards. He turned and walked off up the row, past the trolley bay, out between the bollards, out of the car park entirely, and away up the road on foot. No car. He'd been looking for a car for 10 minutes, and then he walked home. And then I did the part I'd do again, and it still went nowhere. I went over to her, and I kept it short and calm and undramatic. That man in the gray jacket followed you through the whole shop, aisle to aisle, and then came out here after you. I thought you should know. And she looked at me, and she said, oh yeah, I saw him inside. And she laughed a little bit, and she said, it's fine. He's probably just a bit odd. And she put the last bag in, and she closed the boot, and she said, thanks, in the voice that means, please go away now. And she drove off. And I stood there with my shopping going warm in the bag and watched her taillights go up the ramp and out onto the road. No report, no name, nothing anybody would ever have a reason to look at. Just me in a car park holding a bag. I don't tell that one much because there's no ending to it and people want an ending. I don't know his name. I don't know hers. I don't know what he wanted, and I never will. What stuck isn't his face going flat. It's that she got in her car annoyed at me, and she was allowed to be, and I'm honestly glad she was, because that means it worked. Nothing happened to her. That was the whole point. So I still do it. When I see it, I say it out loud, to the person it's about, even when they look at me like I'm the strange one in the story. Being wrong about it cost me 30 seconds of feeling stupid. I've made my peace with that trade. I had 3 hours to kill in a bus station, and that is the entire reason I have this story. Not courage, not instinct, boredom, and a bad coffee, and a seat with a view of the whole hall. And I have thought about it in detail pretty much every week since. It was one of those terminals built into the bottom of a shopping center. Escalators coming down from the shops, a big food hall in the middle, gates and platforms down at one end, and all of it lit like an operating theater. Bright, flat, no shadows anywhere. 200 people in there, and not one of them belonged to another one. Everybody in transit, everybody a stranger, everybody's business completely their own. It's the safest feeling room in the world. Loads of people, loads of light. I noticed him because he was the only person in the building doing nothing. Not resting, not waiting, doing nothing. No bag, no case, no coat over an arm, no coffee, no phone in his hand. Nobody travels with nothing. And in 3/4 of an hour, he never once looked up at the departure board, which is the one thing every single other person in that hall did about every 90 seconds. He was standing off to the side, at the mouth of the little corridor that went back to the toilets. And once I'd clocked that, I clocked the rest of it, and I wish I hadn't. He wasn't watching the hall, he was watching that door. Every time it opened, his head came round. And then it went back, over and over. Open, look, back. Open, look, back. And he wasn't looking at the women who came out of it. He was looking at the space beside them, at whether there was anybody in it. I sat there and I watched him let people go. 2 women came out together, talking. His head came round and went straight back. A woman came out and walked to a man who stood up from a table. Nothing. Another one came out and went to a family group by the escalator. Nothing. 4 times, 5 times, a person came through that door and his head came round and dismissed them. And he didn't move a muscle. Because whatever the answer was, it wasn't the one he was waiting for. And then a woman came out on her own. Late 20s maybe, small rucksack, phone in her hand, nobody with her, nobody waiting. She came out of that corridor and turned into the hall toward the food counters, which is what I'd done an hour before, and everybody in there does at some point. And he came off the wall. Not fast, not obviously. He just stopped being a man standing still and started being a man walking. And it took me maybe 20 seconds to work out why it looked so wrong. Because he wasn't doing what following looks like. He was doing something worse and much quieter. She stopped at a menu board. He stopped. Not near her, 20 feet out, off to her left, in the middle of the floor. She stood there reading it, and he stood there. She moved off, and in the same beat, he moved. She turned toward the coffee place, and he turned, at the same time, at the same speed. And that's when it went through me properly. Because I'd been sat there for an hour looking at that hall, and I hadn't actually seen a single person in it. You can't, everything's moving. The only thing my eye had picked up all evening was a man standing still while everyone went past. And he wasn't standing still anymore. He was tied to her. 20 feet out, matching her, so that anybody glancing over saw 2 people walking through a food hall, which is the one thing a food hall is completely full of. So I looked around for somebody to tell, and this is the part nobody believes. There was nobody. 200 people and not one member of staff on that floor. The counters were behind counters. The security desk was down at the far end by the gates with nobody at it. And I couldn't shout across a food hall at a woman I'd never met. If I did that, he'd just be a man who happened to be walking, and he'd stop, and he'd go and stand somewhere else, and do it again in an hour to somebody I wouldn't be there to see. So I did the smallest thing I could think of. I got up, and I walked a line that took me across the front of him, about 15 feet away, and I didn't go to her, and I didn't say a word to him. I just turned my head and I looked at him, straight on, deliberately. Not a glance, not a scan, not the polite half-second you give a stranger. I put my eyes on him and I left him there, and I kept walking slowly, and I did not stop looking. And he checked. His head came round the way it had come round at that door 40 times, and instead of a hall full of people not seeing him, He got a face pointed directly at his, from 15 feet, in full light, not moving off. The easy walk locked up. His hands came out of his pockets. He looked away and then he looked back, and I was still there, still looking. And he ran, not walked off, not drifted away, not did that thing where they pretend they were leaving anyway. A grown man in an ordinary coat went from standing to a flat-out sprint in a public building at 7 in the evening. Between the tables past the coffee counter, a chair went over, 2 people put their hands out, and he was out through a side door into the car deck and gone. 4 seconds, start to finish. Everyone looked up. Nobody understood what they'd seen. And then the hall just closed over it and went back to being a hall. And the woman the whole thing was about, she never saw 1 second of it. She was at the coffee counter with her back to the room the entire time. I stood there getting my breath, and I watched her pay and walk down toward the gate doors and get met by a group of people who folded her straight in, all bags and talking over each other, and out they went to the platform together, laughing about something. She had a completely normal evening. She still thinks she did. I did tell somebody. I told the woman working the coffee counter, and she came out from behind it and stood next to me, and we both looked, and there was nothing left to look at. And what did I actually have? A man stood in a hallway the best part of an hour and then ran out of a building. Nobody touched anybody. No name, no face I could describe past a gray coat. Nothing on any camera in there that would mean a single thing to anybody who watched it. So, officially, nobody had done anything. And I still don't know how many evenings that corridor had been worked before the one I happened to be sitting in front of. And I never will. And that's the part that doesn't go anywhere. I'm not brave and I'm not clever. I didn't rescue anybody. I never spoke to her. I never touched him. I never even stood up straight. All I did was look at a man on purpose and not look away. And it took apart the whole evening he'd been building since before I got there. So that's the thing I do now, and it's a small, ugly little habit, and I'm keeping it. When something in a busy place doesn't sit right, I don't do the polite thing and find somewhere else to put my eyes. I look, and I let him see me doing it. I still don't know what I'd have done if he hadn't run. I think about that more than I think about him. I hope I never have to find out. And let's never meet. 3 ordinary evenings, and in none of them was I the one being chosen. A man who walked into a little shop, spent 4 minutes with a woman I worked with, and then told me to my face why he had come in. A man who walked a supermarket for half an hour without ever picking one thing up, because he was not shopping, he was walking somebody. And a man in a bus terminal whose feet started the exact instant hers did, until one stranger aimed her eyes at him and he ran out of the building. Nobody was touched, nothing was taken. All 3 of them just went home. So did we. And 2 of the 3 women it was actually about still have no idea any of it happened. So before you close the tab, sit with the quiet question. Of those 3 evenings, which one would you have seen? The man standing too long at a counter, the man at the end of your aisle who never looked at a shelf, or the man whose feet started when hers did? And if you had seen it, would you have said anything? Or would you have told yourself it was probably nothing, the way it almost always is? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe so the next one reaches you before you need it. And the next time a room feels slightly wrong, find the one person nobody else is looking at and keep looking.